Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to our video on your first week and your first impression. In this video, we're going to be talking about your first week of employment. So you got the job and now you're in your first day and your first week. And we're going to talk about why that first week is so darn important, not just from a new hire perspective, but also from a hiring manager, management, peer perspective. So really in the first week, you should have a pretty good idea of the staff, management, your peers, people outside your department. You're going to have first impressions of the onboarding process and plan, have a pretty good idea what that looks like. You're going to have first impressions of the training program, of the office, not just the dynamics of the office in terms of the people, but also how does it look. And then also you're going to have the first impressions of the culture. So we're going to talk about positive experiences and less than positive experiences. In that first week, you should understand the boundaries and the expectations of the position, and that's darn important, understanding what's expected of people. So let's go ahead and dive into the staff, your first impressions of the staff. And this has already started when you've had your interview. So most likely you're interviewing with the hiring manager. It could be actually your direct manager, but you kind of know a little bit at least of who you may be interacting with, and maybe you already kind of know about what their culture is and maybe some of their expectations, but you really don't know until you're actually there. So, the questions that you should be asking yourself, that you will be asking yourself, is how are you being received by everyone? From the minute you get there, from the person who's greeting you to the next person. It could be actually the person who's going to show you around. It could be your manager. It could be a team lead. But what's your experience from the person who's greeting you? Are they friendly? Are they not so friendly? Is the next person, are they really welcoming you? Are the peers really welcoming you, or are they just kind of like, oh, hi, and just kind of blow you off? And this is important because this is the first impression of how people are interacting with others. So were you introduced to everyone in the office and shown around to the key areas such as your work area, your cubicle? And that's important because people want to know where to put their stuff and where their little home is. Were you shown other departments, other key managers, where the lunchroom is, where the bathroom is, where the supply room, just things where you can kind of orient yourself. And that's important because, again, you want people who are new to at least feel comfortable that this is kind of their home away from home. And the faster that you can get people to feel like they're welcome and this is their home, the better. Everybody wants to feel like they're supposed to be in the area. How are people communicating to you, and how are they communicating to others? So, a lot of times people are going to be very welcoming to a new person. That's a minimum, that they should be welcoming to the new person. But how are they communicating with others? Are they smiling? Are they you kind of feel like a joy in the air? Or is it very heavy? How is this making you feel as a new person? How do you feel? I mean, you kind of know. You're formulating your impressions. And from a hiring manager, from a management perspective, again, it's important that the person has a very favorable response to this because you're kind of setting expectations for that new hire of what's expected of them as well. So let's go back again to the staff. Let's go back to a favorable impression and a less than favorable impression. So a favorable experience obviously looks like someone greets them at the reception desk. They're very friendly. They'll say, oh, so let me get so-and-so. I'll be right with you. That person comes. They're very welcoming. They're showing you around. They're introducing you to other managers. Everyone, is very friendly to you, shaking your hand, saying, welcome. You'll love it here. I'm glad you're here. Things of that nature. You'll know where, say, the HR person might be, and that's important if you're working in a big organization. And you'll feel comfortable. You'll start just feeling, very comfortable. Whereas a not so favorable experience might look like you come in and the person's not at the front area, and you're kind of there, and the person who comes says, "Oh, yeah, well, let me kind of walk you around," and they quickly walk you around, and they don't tell you where to go next. They don't tell you where to put your personal belongings, and you don't know what to do, and it's awkward. It's extremely awkward for a new person. You know, everyone else knows what to do, but you don't. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Let's talk about onboarding. So onboarding is really part of what we just discussed in terms of, how are people walking around, but it's much more in depth than that. We provided an onboarding plan. Some organizations provide very detailed ones. I personally am a fan of that. It should include things like your HR paperwork. Who are the key personnel? Who's the HR, director or manager? Who's the CEO? Who are the key people in the organization? Who's your manager? Who's their manager? It should outline, what are their core values? What resources are available to you? It should include kind of a schedule, agenda per day, just to let you know what you're going to be doing each day, each week, each month. And that's important because it makes people understand what's expected of them. And it really is setting the tone that you expect your new hire to be somewhat organized, because you're organizing their days for them initially when they start. Now, you may want the person to, kind of fly the nest sooner than later, and that's fine and dandy. But at least giving them some sort of agenda when they first start is important. I find that when people understand what's expected of them during those first few months, helps the retention rate. Why people leave organizations is they don't know what's expected of them. They feel very just kind of like an afterthought. They don't have a good training plan, and that makes people feel very anxious, and they tend to leave. The onboarding plan should include things like the expectations for performance. So what do the goals and objectives look like? Other expectations are going to include things like timeliness, attending meetings, maybe regular meetings with the team, monthly meetings with your manager, things like that. So it should outline some sort of expectation. So going back to our example, favorable experience looks like you're taking you around the office, you're back to your cubicle, the training manager or the hiring manager, whoever, goes through your onboarding plan. So you know what is expected of you, so that you can flip back to it and feel, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be here. Oh, okay, this is going to go on. Okay, this is what I'll be doing tomorrow. Okay, this, things like that makes people feel comfortable. The unfavorable experience. You don't know that we're going back to the unfavorable experience where a person walks in, they're kind of not, they don't know where to go. They have zero plan, nothing's given to them. They're kind of standing there still, not knowing the person, and a person has to ask, where should I go? Oh, I don't know. You just go into that room, and they're having a training. So the person, goes in there, feels extremely awkward because you're walking in the middle of a training class. Not a favorable experience, right? And nothing's still given to you. Okay. First impressions of the training. This is important. The better that we can train people, the more successful they're going to be. So the things that go into a first impression of training is, was it discussed during the interview? Hopefully the training was discussed during the interview, so you have a little bit of preparation. Were you provided a training schedule? Now, a lot of times onboarding plans include like a training schedule. What's the duration of the training? Is it on-site? Is it off-site? What's the location? Who's the instructor? What's the subject matter? What manuals do you need? What resources do you need? These are things that should be in a training schedule, and the training should get you somewhat prepared for when you're actually doing the job that you're hired for. You feel sort of prepared. Not fully prepared. I'm telling you, especially if you don't have experience in the field, you're not going to be 100% prepared. There's no way experience will make you prepared. You're going to make boo-boos, but you're never going to be 100% prepared, especially if you're new in the industry. You're never going to be prepared. But you should feel somewhat prepared, kind of pumped up and sort of ready to go, but you should feel a little bit comfortable. Going back to the positive experience, The onboarding plan has a training schedule. The person goes through that sort of training, whether it's 1 day, 1 week, 6 weeks, whatever that looks like. They're ready. They feel somewhat prepared to start doing the job that they were hired for. Unfavorable experience. The person's in that training room, kind of thrown a piece of paper, but it's talking about telephone scripts, but you're not even sure like where the first step is. You have to ask for training materials, and they kind of give you something, but there's really no organization to it. It just makes people feel very awkward and unsure of what do I need to do. So this is about making people feel at least somewhat comfortable, a little bit structured, where they're pumped up and ready to go and do the job that they're hired for. So let's talk about first impressions of the office. This is basically, you're scanning the operation. Is the office clean and organized? Was your cubicle set up upon arrival? Was it clean and sort of personalized? Is the lunchroom tidy? Is the supply room organized? These are important things because it's setting a message to a new person of what you expect of them. If your place is organized, it's an indirect communication to the person that they're expected to be organized. If the place is in a state of disarray and it's dirty, what kind of message is that sending to a new hire? What that means, the expectations of them is it's okay to have your desk be disorganized, be messy. These are important things. I can safely say that when a new hire comes to an organization and their cubicle, where their little home is very clean, it's very organized, it has all the resources lined out for them, it has a little personalized card or whatever you want to do to personalize it, that goes a long way. That sets the expectations to that new person that they're expected to be very welcoming and respectful and generous. It's sending indirect messages all over the place. So the office is darn important, and it's indirectly communicating messages to that new person. So let's talk about the first impression of the culture. And the culture is all these things we're talking about and more. So the culture is comprising the people, the behaviors, the actions, the beliefs, and really what a new hire is focusing on is the communication, direct and indirect communication. So are people going around, with frowns on their face? Are they smiling? Are they happy? Are they welcoming you? Do they talk about people behind their back? Is there a lot of gossip? This is important, what goes on in a culture. Culture is also comprised of what's allowed and what's not allowed. Are people allowed to put the feet up on the desk? Maybe some, that's fine, but maybe some it's not allowed. Does the culture promote inclusion? So inclusion, encompasses a whole bunch of items, but just to kind of give you an example, an inclusion might be something like, maybe someone uses cursing on the floor. Manager curses on the floor. In my world, that doesn't really promote inclusion because it bothers me and most likely it's going to bother somebody else. So, and some organizations think that's just, very loose and it gets people loosened up. I don't feel that way. Does it promote inclusion in the sense of, when people are communicating, can everybody be welcome, in that sort of conversation, or is it making people not feel welcome in that conversation? So that's kind of what I mean. It is a broad sort of umbrella, but basically it's about, the messaging, the communication, and making sure that it's okay by everybody for what you're discussing or saying. Does the culture, does it promote success for all? Do you see growth opportunities for the employees? Do you see stretch assignments? Do you see just sort of on the resource sites, on the websites, how people are promoting maybe volunteer efforts? So basically like success of everyone. Is there a lot of messaging going on and a lot of discussion around that? Do you feel you'll be supported? That's a big one because you want to make sure if you have questions, you know who to go to and you know they're going to be there to answer your question. And if they're not, who else can you go to? Can you go to a peer? Feeling supported is extremely important. And lastly, is it aligned with your core values? And this is important because if it's not aligned with your core values, it's going to bug you. So if you're in an organization where maybe they are teasing one another, but you're not finding it very funny because it's going to make someone feel badly, or they're cursing on the floor, or they don't reward their people for great work. You got to know what your core values are, and if it's aligned, you're going to feel good about the organization. If it's not aligned, it will bug you, and it will eventually bring you down. So it's up to you on making that decision. If you can work in an organization where you're not aligned. Personally, I can't work in an organization where I'm not aligned with their core values. That's how important it is to me, but that's my experience. So your culture is darn important. You spend a lot of time at work, and the culture is imperative for your career success and also your personal success. So let's talk about, in the first week, you should understand the boundaries and the expectations. So you should start knowing what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to either your manager or the peer group. So things like maybe it could be, again, putting your feet on your desk, or kind of slumping back with your arms crossed during your work. Maybe people are fine with that. Maybe people aren't fine with that. It's really up to what the organization defines as acceptable, not acceptable. Maybe it's a timeliness issue. There's a whole bunch of policies out there that hopefully people are explaining to you. They're not going to be able to explain every single one, but the more that you read in the manuals, the training manuals, the HR manuals, you'll start understanding what's acceptable and not acceptable. Your first week, you should really start identifying what is expected of you. The expectations are important. People need to know what's expected of them. And this is one of the breakdowns that I do see in organizations, is that new hires do not know what's expected of them. They don't know what kind of performance is expected of them. What are the minimum expectations? What are the behaviors? What's the expected behavior? And what happens is, a lot of times we'll just assume. A new hire is going to assume they worked at another organization. They're going to bring over those expectations and those assumptions to their new place. And it may be accurate, it may not. So as a training manager, as a trainer, it's really important that the new hire understands what goals and objectives are expected of them. In the first week, you should start talking about it. Maybe they haven't hit the floor yet. Maybe they haven't even contributed to a result. Knowing what's expected of someone is really darn important, so that people aren't assuming. Okay? And as a new hire, if you're not given that information, ask for it. So let's wrap this up in the bow. In this video, we talked about first week. You're going to have a lot of first impressions. So you're going to have first impressions of the staff, the onboarding process and the plan, the training, the office, the culture, what your expectations are, and what are the boundaries set for you. So your impressions may change over time. But for the most part, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what this organization is all about. Now, again, you're not going to know everything. Things will change a little bit, but that first week is your first impression. And as you know, you can't. You don't have a second chance at a first impression. It's true. Your first impressions are important. As a new hire, as a trainer, as a training manager, these things are important for people feeling welcome, people feeling valued, people feeling respected, people understanding what they're supposed to do, people feeling comfortable. The more that you can have that all set, the more that people will stay in that first few months. Those are critical retention months of people feeling like, okay, I can see myself, I can see a future here. The more that we have retention, if we're a leader, the more retention that we have, the better production that we have, the less interruptions we have, the more team building that we have. When we have people leave, it costs the organization a lot of money. It causes a lot of extra work for other people who are here, and it strains the operation. So why not be very proactive and have our new people stay with us for the future of their career span. But really, the bottom line is that first week, a new hire should feel really excited about their future. Like, oh, I love this job. It's going to be hard, man. Oh my gosh, I'm excited, but I'm nervous. I love the people. I love the culture. I understand how to add value. I understand what the expectations are. I'm very excited. That's the feeling you should get. So, I hope you enjoyed our video. Thank you for attending our session, and for additional resources or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com. Feel free to email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com or give me a ring at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and have a very empowered day.